What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I'm Shaw Local Bears beat reporter Sean Hammond. Joining me, as always, is Shaw Local's very own Michael Dwojak. Bears training camp is in the books. They selected their 53-man roster. They've already changed, as we know, that's ever changing, and they've already made one change. When the long snapper is the most interesting thing that happened, that usually means it's that there weren't too many surprises. Michael, what were your thoughts on the Bears roster as it stands right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was whether, Bayless Jones was going to make the roster, right? And he did. And, I'm sure there can be some conversation as to whether that would have happened if it wasn't for, Ian Wheeler, tearing his ACL that, they talked about and really focused on in the latest episode of Hard Knocks. But yeah, it was kind of low key. Like, I feel like we heard Ryan Poles talk a lot about, how hard it was going to be to make this team. And he even talked about it on Wednesday about how, tough it was to make cuts. Like, obviously, he's been in that situation before. He's obviously gone through that process as a player. But, he talked about, building the relationships with a lot of different players and a lot of guys telling him that, they really want to be a part of this because it feels special. Like, it feels like something that's going to be successful. So, yeah, obviously, it's always interesting for us because obviously, these are people's lives. These are people, trying to make NFL rosters. There's a human aspect to this as opposed to just being like, this guy got cut, whatever. That's really a tough day for a lot of guys. But, looking at the Bears perspective, not a lot of surprises. Obviously, some injured players going on short-term and long-term IR. But, yeah, it was kind of a low-key cut day in regards to surprises, I guess.
Yeah, not a lot of surprises. They were allowed to designate two players to short-term IR before the deadline. They had a third, Patrick Scales, the long snapper, who needs to go on IR. So he was initially on the 53-man roster. He is now on IR, and they re-signed fullback Kari Blasingame. Obviously, they're going to need a long snapper. Like that's as much as we're joking about at the top. That position, that's a really important spot. You need a guy who can snap on your punts and your field goals and all that. So they're going to be looking to bring somebody in. Of course, we'll kind of have to see. I imagine that'll just be a situation where they're just calling somebody up from the practice squad ahead of the week one game. But yeah, Patrick Scales is going to be out for about at least a month. If you're on IR, you're out for 4 weeks at least. And so we'll see when some of those guys come back. Larry Borum, the tackle, and Jacob Martin, the defensive end, were the other two guys that went on IR. Yeah, Bayless made the roster. I didn't find that to be surprising. I know there's some Bears fans out there who do. I'm just not surprised at all. I mean, I think that was he's a guy that they want for the kick return job. And they're, the whole running back experiment is just trying to find any possible way that they can get him involved on the offense. I don't think we're going to see him necessarily touching the ball a whole lot on offense at all. And Bears fans will probably be okay with that. But yeah, he's going to be back there for the kick returns. DeAndre Carter also made the roster, likely as the punt returner. Again, another guy who I don't think we're going to see a ton of him on the offensive end. You're going to see those top three receivers when they're healthy. But yeah, both those guys are important special teams additions. And, the other spot that I kind of wanted to talk about too, Michael, was that defensive end spot. They obviously, since we last talked on here, they traded for Darald Taylor, a veteran guy who's been around the block with the Seahawks. They kept Daniel Hardy on the roster. They kept Austin Booker. They kept Dominique Robinson. There's a lot of names over there. And at least I wonder if they're done though. Like, have they done enough? I don't know that there's that superstar talent you're looking for opposite Montez Sweat yet.
No, I don't think you necessarily have that right now. But it kind of goes back to what we've been talking about for most of training camp at this point, is just that it seems like Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus want to see what do they have here, within the program. Obviously, they brought in some talent with the trade, but it seems like they're just pretty committed to just seeing what can Booker be a rotational guy? Can he really step up in his rookie season as opposed to, being a developmental guy, DeMarcus Walker? Obviously, Hardy had a great training camp. So I think it'll be interesting to see just, how much. I guess I'm interested to see as we kind of look forward to the season. How long is the leash? Like,
Yeah.
is it going to be, if it's very clear that the Bears are a defensive end away from being strong playoff contenders, do you make a trade right now? Or, how long do you kind of let that happen? Do you obviously, it's kind of tough because obviously, Booker is a rookie. You've got some other guys who have kind of, played around on some rosters and tried to, kind of make 53-man rosters. So it's not like you have right now like a Montez Sweat exactly toward the opposite of him. But I am curious to see how long is this going to last, and there come a point where it becomes clear that the Bears are a defensive end pass rusher away from being a serious contender in the NFC North and even in the NFC. And whether Ryan Poles is really quick to make a trade and just be like, listen, we're one guy away. I've got draft capital. Let's make a move right now because you got to take advantage of every opportunity you get.
Yeah, they're giving these guys every opportunity to step up to the plate and make some big plays. Right. They're giving DeMarcus Walker a real chance here. They're giving, obviously they brought in Darald Taylor. They're going to give him a real chance. They're going to give, if Austin Booker and Daniel Hardy are doing the right things in practice, they're going to get opportunities on game day. Right. Now, somebody's probably going to have to be inactive from this group, and it's possible if they're still looking to add at a spot like a long snapper spot, maybe one of these guys could be in danger of being cut. But at the same time, like there's too many intriguing options not to give it a look. That's how I feel about this. The way Austin Booker played, the way Daniel Hardy played, you got too many young guys. Daniel Hardy's still a young guy too. He was the 2022 draft class. Young guys who are hungry. Give them a shot, see what happens. If it doesn't work out, you got 8 weeks to figure something out before the trade deadline. That could be a big move. That could be a minor move. I think it's worth it to just see what you have in this group. Darald Taylor is an interesting one because obviously his pro career kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start. He missed his rookie season due to injury. A couple of years ago, he had 9.5 sacks. And so you really, really like that. That's huge potential there. He's never been like a regular starter with the Seahawks. He's started some here and there. He's been in the rotation all the time. But, if he gets an opportunity to really see some serious snaps, what can he do? Can he get back to that 9-sack type season that he had a couple of years ago? Obviously, the Bears really like the potential for that. And they like what they saw in him. And I think, I wouldn't be too worried about the Seahawks giving up on the guy. I mean, they have a whole new defensive staff. They have a defensive-minded head coach. They're bringing in a whole new system. This happens. Guys fall out of favor with the new staff, and I don't think that's a huge surprise with him.
No, I don't think so either. And I think I like that, Ryan Poles kind of took he gave up a 6th-round pick, just took a flyer. Just obviously he's shown his, I forget exactly what the stat was. I'm not trying to compare him to Montez Sweat, but I think he has like a similar amounts of sacks or like similar amounts of stats. Obviously, I know he doesn't, the run, his defense against the run isn't exactly perfect and exactly what you would want. But, he's shown flashes. And if you just have to give up a 6th-round pick to kind of see if you can kind of do something with a guy that is basically just buried in the Seahawks lineup, why not, take a chance and, kind of see what you got there. But, yeah, I would agree. Like, there's so much talent on the other side. You just kind of see what you have there at that point. And then, like we mentioned earlier, if it doesn't end up working, if Booker needs another year, if Hardy and Robinson and, some of the other guys, it was more of a training camp thing as opposed to, translating to the regular season, maybe you make a move then. But I do agree at this point, they have plenty of guys to kind of just see what do we have right now. And if it works out, it works out. And if it doesn't, then you might need to start giving up some draft picks, which at this point, Poles and the Bears have a lot of.
You make a great point, Michael. Darald Taylor's first 3 healthy seasons, 21.5 sacks. Montez Sweat's first 3 seasons, 21 sacks.
Right.
I mean, look, some of these guys blossom later. That's just how this goes sometimes. And so, yeah, why not take a chance on a guy, especially if Seattle's seen what they needed to see and they're ready to move on. Robert, here asks, and guys, I should say, if you're watching on YouTube, join the conversation. Come join us in the chat. Always love to hear from you guys. We're going to answer some of your Bears questions. Do us a favor, hit the thumbs up. If you're listening later on Spotify or Apple, follow us, subscribe to our show. Those are great ways to support the show. And as always, head to shawlocal.com for all of our Bears coverage. Robert's question here is about the schedule. Are they taking a couple days off here? They have one last practice today. Actually, I'm gonna have to cut this a little bit shorter than usual because I got to get out to Hallis Hall. They have one last practice today, and then they're going to have a couple of days off here for the long weekend until they get back to things on Monday, and then they'll have their usual Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practices ahead of the game. That's how it's going to look during game week. So this is always a little bit of a weird in between week. They had a practice yesterday, and they did kind of practice. It was a 2-hour practice. Michael, you were there too. I mean, it wasn't just like a walkthrough. Like they're doing a little bit to really stay fresh, stay locked in, I guess is what a coach would say. Yeah. It's not just walking around. Like they're actually trying to get some work done this week, but they're going to have the long weekend to recover and sort of rest up for week one. Another thing we should talk about, another roster thing. Of course, they left Brett Rippon off the roster. I didn't think that was a huge surprise, even with the rule change regarding the quarterbacks and how many times you can call them up from the practice squad. But the news out of ESPN this morning is that Rippon is signing with Minnesota on their active roster. So yeah, that's why we didn't see them bring him back on the practice squad. So you got Caleb Williams, you got Tyson Bagent, and you got Austin Reed as your three quarterbacks right now in Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? Just based on, how much, I know people like to give Hard Knocks a hard time for how much they focus on Austin Reed in like the first 3 episodes. But, I'm curious to see what, Poles and Waldron and all the offensive staff kind of saw in Reed. And, it's not a surprise that they're going to probably keep 2 and Reed's the guy who's going to be on the practice squad. But I am curious to see, what they kind of saw in Reed that kind of made him a better, option as opposed to, Rippon. And, I think most Bears fans would say that, Ryan Poles did a good job in evaluating Tyson Bagent as a good backup. I know Tyson obviously has other dreams and that kind of stuff, but I feel like most Bears fans feel pretty confident that if, something does happen to Caleb this year, Tyson Bagent will be a good backup option. So yeah, I am interested just to see, Matt Eberflus said he liked, what he saw yesterday from Reed, and that's kind of why they decided to have him at the practice squad level. But yeah, I'm not really surprised keeping 2, quarterbacks on the roster, one guy in the practice squad, and Reed is the guy that gets the choice, and Rip ends up going to a division rival.
Yeah, Rippon was asked this. I think it was last week when we got to talk to him. Like, what are your thoughts on staying, at a place where you already know the playbook versus the exact situation that's just played out, where he got obviously you get an active roster spot, you're gonna take that, and that's kind of what he said in so many words. Like the financials of that, that's obviously the smart decision to make. You're going to go play for the team that's offering you an active roster spot. Yeah. You're going to make a lot more money doing that. Right. And so that's really no surprise to see. I mean, I think it maybe hurts a little bit that you're losing that guy, that you're losing one of your veteran backups. But at the same time, we're talking about the third quarterback. Like you said, Michael, Tyson Bagent, they're really excited about what they have in their backup. Obviously, they're really excited about Caleb and where this thing is heading moving forward. You don't want to wind up playing your third quarterback, but it happens. And so it's something you have to consider. It happens. And Rick says in the comments, and this is a really great point, youngest QB room by far. Yeah, you're talking about a quarterback room that has 4 NFL starts between the 3 guys you have right now. That's a little bit scary. I mean, I know we're talking about Caleb Williams, and I know we're excited about Tyson Bagent, but 4 starts among your 3 quarterbacks is a little bit scary, isn't it?
Yeah, and there is something to obviously having experience, right? Like, obviously, I know Tyson brings back a year of experience, and he went through it a lot last year. But, I think there was a strong push from Bears fans to be like, bring in a veteran who, can kind of teach Caleb. And, if something does happen to Caleb, you can still, kind of salvage whatever else is going on and try to get a playoff run, even if something does happen to Caleb. But clearly the Bears felt comfortable with what they have at this point. Doesn't seem to really be a worry for them. I know some people, I think it's Tannehill, want him to come in. I think that would have just been too much of a distraction. I think he wants to have a starter's job, and that's not going to happen here in Chicago. So as much as, he would be a really nice backup, that didn't really seem to be a top option for both parties at this point. But it will be interesting to see. Obviously, if the Bears get to their third quarterback, things are going terribly wrong. And it's hard to argue that, whoever the third quarterback is, that things would be going well at that point. But it's interesting. It's a young group, but clearly Poles and the rest of the offensive staff just feels pretty confident that this group can kind of pick up Shane Waldron's offense and execute it at a pretty good level.
Mike asks here about the NFLPA vetoing the emergency QB thing. Yeah, that's a little bit confusing, and I think we should explain that, because last year the rule was you can have your third quarterback inactive, but he has to be on your 53-man roster on game day. Otherwise, and he'll go into the game if the first two guys both get ruled out due to injury. And so the league was changing that rule this year, where you could have that third quarterback on the practice squad, and you could. The idea was you'd be able to call him up on game day an unlimited number of times, and that is not how it goes. Like when we talk about guys getting called up from the practice squad, you're only allowed to do that to a guy 3 times during the season. Otherwise, then you have to sign him to your active roster. And really, it comes down to money. Guys are making so much more money when they're on an active roster, and calling guys up from the practice squad, while they'll get a game paycheck, that's still really favors the team. You're not really paying him to be on the active roster during the week. And so the NFLPA vetoed that unlimited number of call-ups for the third quarterback, because that would essentially be a player on the active roster who's not getting paid like it. And so they didn't like that. And yeah, we learned that, just the day before, or the day of the cuts. And so that was a little bit of a wrinkle. I still didn't think the Bears would keep ripping. I just don't. Yeah. I don't know. I think they had guys in other spots who were more valuable to them and had more potential, guys like your Daniel Hardys and your Austin Bookers and all those guys.
Bayless Jones.
Bayless Jones. So, Michael, we got a few more minutes here before we got to run. Let's talk big picture, because we're finally through training camp. We're finally through the preseason. We're looking at September 8th, Tennessee Titans, Chicago Bears, Soldier Field, first game of the season. And then, we're off and running from there. You and I wrote this. We have a weekend story coming out in a couple of days, looking at sort of some of our big picture predictions for the season. And I'm going to throw it to you first. We're going to go to the one that everyone's most interested in. How many games is this team going to win, Michael?
I played the, going through the schedule game and, just win, loss, and that sort of stuff. And for much of the season, I had them being a 500 team. I had them, maybe a game or two over 500 at some points of the year, but eventually they got back to 500. And, I think that start to the season, that Titans game, I'm not going to call it a must-win game. That'd be crazy. But it sure feels like if you start the year with a loss there, then you go to Houston and then you go to Indianapolis, that's a pretty tough start to the year. And you don't want to start the year 0-3. You don't want to have bad vibes like you did last year, right? Especially with the new quarterback, with the team that's expected to do so well. So, I have this team around 500 for most of the year. And I do have them at 9-8. I think that's enough to get them into the playoffs. I think I had them winning both of their matchups against the Vikings and then splitting their matchups against the Lions and the Packers. But, I think the biggest thing is, there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of talent on this team. The offense looks great. Caleb Williams looks great. The defense looks amazing. But then you still have a rookie quarterback, right? And I think that's the biggest thing to remember. Caleb's going to make mistakes. It's going to be hard. Like, I don't think he's going to look like CJ Stroud. I think that's pretty tough to do, because CJ Stroud was one of the few quarterbacks to look like CJ Stroud, right? Like during his rookie year. So I think there are going to be some mistakes and some learning moments, especially early in the year in some of those division games. So, from a 7-win team to a 9-win team making the playoffs, I think you see the progress you want to see. And then you really build things up for what should be a pretty big season next year with a year under Caleb's belt and a lot of talent, locked in for the future.
Okay, here's where I'm at. And I'm usually the cautious guy, I picked the Packers in week 1 last year and people hated me. And the Packers came out and punched the Bears in the mouth and won that game by 20 points or whatever. I'm usually the cautious one who's saying, let's slow down, folks. Like I agree with what you're saying. It's a rookie quarterback. It's there's going to be some bumps and bruises along the way. I actually have this team starting out 2-2. I think they're going to be 500. Yeah. It's going to be a fine start. He's going to have some ups, some downs. He'll probably make some mistakes. And then I look at that middle stretch there, Carolina, Jacksonville, Washington, and I see no reason why they can't win all 3 of those games. I see no reason. I really think there's a world in which if everything goes right and health plays their favor and Caleb is as good as advertised, this team could be 6-3 before they play an NFC North opponent. And I think Caleb Mania would be crazy in Chicago if that plays out. And I think certainly I could be very wrong about this, and this could all go downhill and things could be a lot tougher to start the season. But I think this team gets off to a hot start. I think Chicago is in love with Caleb. And then I think it maybe slightly crashes down a little bit and you have a tough stretch there at the end in November, December, January. I think they probably lose 4 of those last 6, but I still think this is a 10-7 football team. I think this is a team that's going to make the postseason as a 6 or 7 seed in the NFC. I think it's going to be a really exciting first half of the season. And there's going to be a lot of tough moments that second half and a lot of tough opponents. And that's going to be tough. You're going to see, we heard Cole Kmet talking yesterday about these guys are going to hit the rookie wall at some point. That's real. Yeah. Cole says, Cole believes that that's real. He remembers hitting that rookie wall in December of his rookie season. This is a longer season than any of these young guys have ever played. And especially with a quarterback, that's your most important position. And at some point that fatigue is going to set in. I do think this is a 10-win football team, having watched all of training camp, having watched the defense, the offense, and the potential you see in that offense. I think this defense is good enough to carry this team to something like a 500 record. And if everything goes right on the offensive end, I think they can win 10 games.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that. I guess I am just taking your cautious approach of being like, it's one of those things where it's like we've seen this so many times before with, Bears and that kind of stuff. And I know that the past isn't a determinant of what, is going to happen this year. But I do think you just need to kind of look at things where it's like, we've been here before so many times. And I feel like so many Bears fans have been kind of kicked and then just been like, we're doing this again. And that doesn't mean that's going to necessarily happen with this. And, yesterday we heard it from Cole just talking about how different everything feels, and everything does feel different. But I do think that there are just going to be some moments throughout the year where you're just going to have a quarterback who maybe isn't, exactly sure where he's supposed to go. He'll have the talent around him. And I think injuries play a factor too, right? Like at this point, you need to assume one or two of your top players are going to get injured this year. That's just how life is in the NFL. Everyone has to deal with it. Everyone has to overcome it. And I think, the depth is pretty good on both sides of the ball for the Bears. But yeah, I am interested to see, like you talked about earlier, the first half of the season is very much, at this point, very much easier than, the second half of the season. So
absolutely.
If the Bears need to pick up their wins, they need to do it in the first half. And if they stumble, it's going to be hard to kind of recover in the second half against some, tough division opponents and out of division opponents as well. So it'll be interesting to see just how they kind of develop, how, Caleb, Rome, all the different rookies handle that rookie wall, and, how much of a difference it will make having, so much talent around Caleb, something that, Ryan Poles, Eberflus, and even Cole Kmet talked about him leaning on, during those tough moments.
I'm not a gambling guy, but I thought, correct me in the comments, guys, if I'm wrong. I thought the over under for the Bears was 8.5, and if that's still the case, that's an over from both of us. And really, we're talking about the difference in one win here. You got them winning 9 games, I got them winning 10. That's kind of crazy. Just to after what the Bears have been through the last 2 years, it's kind of crazy that's kind of the numbers that we're talking about. We're talking about this team as potentially being a playoff team, and look, it's entirely possible in the NFC. There's some good teams at the top, but then you get past those first 3, 4, 5 teams, and I really think that there's a bunch of teams in that middle that can steal a wild card spot and work their way into the postseason. And I think the Bears are absolutely one of them. A couple other predictions we're making this weekend. We're sort of previewing them here on the show. Michael, who is your team MVP?
I think my team MVP. I just wrote this yesterday, so I don't know why I'm not remembering it.
I wrote it yesterday too.
I think it was DJ Moore, and I know
a
lot
of
people are going to be like, well, everything goes well. Obviously, it has to be Caleb, but DJ Moore he's been the most talented player on this team ever since the Bears traded for him. His athletic skills are crazy. His ability to make impressive catches, his yaks, he's just an elite athlete who does so well. And I think if DJ Moore is your best player, Caleb Williams is having a good season. Rome Odunze is having a good season. Keenan Allen's having a good season. I know a lot of the times, as far as your quarterback goes, that's how far the team goes. But this year, for how good DJ Moore will be, I think that really helps, Caleb have a safety net, someone that he knows that he can rely on when he maybe doesn't see anything or maybe isn't entirely sure of what the play is going to be. He just wants to loft it over to Moore and he'll make an impressive catch. So I think that's kind of the guy who's going to have to kind of step up this year. And he did it last year. He was by far the Bears' best player last year. And I think that's going to continue this year. Now, having this conversation in a couple of years will be a lot of fun just based on the talent that the Bears have kind of gathered. Yeah. But for this upcoming year, I think DJ Moore is going to be their team MVP.
Yeah, he definitely would have won that award last year. And I think that's a great selection. I think that's a great pick. We both picked Caleb Williams as our rookie of the year. No surprise really there. My team MVP might feel like it's out of left field a little bit. I'm going with Jalen Johnson at cornerback, and that's not really maybe out of left field, but you look at the defense. I still think the identity of this team is going to be Matt Eberflus's defense, especially what we saw the second half of last year. These guys, yeah, we can nitpick about the second defensive end. These guys have a really good defense now, as it stands right now. This is a potentially. I see no reason why it can't be a top 10 defense right now. And maybe, if they do add somebody at the trade deadline, you could say top 5, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think Jalen Johnson, I know last year, obviously, this isn't like an under the radar guy. He was a second team All-Pro.
Right.
And I believe him when he says that he's not done. The money, the contract is not the end game for him. Just the way that we've watched him the last handful of years that he's been with the Bears, I really do think this is a guy who wants to be first team All-Pro. This is a guy who knows he has to stay healthy and who knows and showed last year that he can take the football away. I think this guy's going to be the certainly the MVP of that defense and maybe even the MVP of this team. Obviously, you're right. That depends what's going on the other side. That depends what's happening on the offensive end. But I mean, this is a guy who is kind of your heart and soul defensively. He's not afraid to say what he thinks. He's the guy who's sort of one of those leaders on that defensive end and isn't afraid to speak up. And I think if he stays healthy, I think that's the only thing that will keep him from having a good year is if he can't stay healthy, whether it's a shoulder or a hamstring, whatever. We've seen that in the past. If this guy plays 15, 16 games, I think he can have an even better season than he did last year.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially because, he does seem motivated. I feel like it started kind of when Eberflus kind of took over where, he could have easily pouted and just been like, well, why is he putting me on the second team? I'm obviously a first team guy. He obviously worked his way to be a star for the Bears at that position. Obviously, he worked his way to get the contract. And he seemed pretty annoyed this year. He still feels like he doesn't get the recognition, obviously, as
Yeah.
a top 100 player. I think this guy's motivated. I think he's still, the contract is there, the money is there, but he's a motivated guy who wants to be recognized as the top corner in the NFL, and he still feels disrespected. And obviously, he took that step last year, getting those interceptions up. But I would definitely agree. Obviously, there are a lot of candidates on this team who would really help. The Bears. The Bears are succeeding if they're playing well, but I definitely think Jalen, especially for what he means to that defense as a veteran leader, is definitely a top guy to consider.
All right, I hate to cut it short, guys, but I got to get out to Hallis Hall. We will be back next week to preview the season opener against the Tennessee Titans. Thank you, everyone who's joined us live and who's been commenting. We do see all your comments. I know we didn't get to everything, but I got to get out of here. Once again, hit the thumbs up on YouTube, like and subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Head to shawlocal.com to read all of our work. And please consider subscribing. That is the #1 best way to support us. Subscribe at shawlocal.com. He's Michael Dwojak. Find him on Twitter at mdwojak94. I'm Sean Hammond. I'm at Sean_Hammond. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and have a great long weekend.